Pictures of Halifax Harbor for you as we keep our eye there because battle-tested Canadian veterans come back from a long tour of duty. It's HMCS Charlottetown returning to that home port of Halifax later on this morning, 9 o'clock Eastern, pulling into port 10 o'clock Atlantic. The ship has spent almost 9 months as part of a multinational counter-terrorism task force patrolling the Mediterranean and Arabian seas. Defense Minister Peter MacKay will be alongside, port side, part of the official welcoming committee. He's my guest, so I get to be the welcoming committee for him from Halifax this morning. Good to see you, Minister MacKay, on this. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Heather. Nice to be with you.
Let's just go back to those live shots for just a second, if we can, because let's start with the weather. The ship's going to be sailing in. Looks to be nice, you know, a little bit of wave activity, but relatively calm seas there. But I know that weather was a concern for Charlottetown's return.
It was indeed, and they would have been tracking Hurricane Leslie in an effort to determine safe passage. But as you can see from those pictures, Bedford Basin has a bit of a chop on, but the weather's actually quite nice. It's quite a beautiful morning. And there's a lot of excitement and anticipation to see the Charlottetown pull into its home port. 250 sailors and airmen and women aboard who are coming home. Their families will be anxiously awaiting their arrival, and they have had a very busy 8 months or more taking part in 2 international missions abroad.
I want to talk to you about what they did during the missions in a second, but
Sure.
We have seen that homecoming scene so many times. The reunions, etc. No matter how many times we see it, it's incredibly moving and very powerful. You've seen it many times as well, and you'll see it again this morning. But what do you experience at a homecoming?
Well, it's very emotional and a very human reunion of sorts of loved ones, watching their faces, their eyes as they look for their loved one on the deck, the waves, that first encounter. Those men and women will be coming down the gangplank and holding their loved ones tight. In some cases, seeing new children who have arrived in their absence, marriage proposals that have occurred. It's a reunion. It's such an enduring image in this port as it is in ports around the world. But any homecoming inevitably brings a wave of emotions over people, and to bear witness to that is really quite heartwarming.
Wonderful. And again, after, in this case, another successful mission, as you said, almost 9 months at sea, first part of Operation Active Endeavour, and then part of Operation Artemis. So that was that anti-terrorism mission. The highlight for the Canadians was a mission off the coast of Yemen. Tell me about what they did there.
Well, they actually seized a large amount of narcotics that were inevitably bound for Europe or North America. So it's part of patrolling the high seas. We know that these are the superhighways now that bring so much goods and services, and in some cases threat to North American shores. So Canada is playing its part. The Charlottetown and now the HMCS Regina that has switched in to carry on this mission, playing an important part internationally. And this is also a very poignant day, as you would know, the 11th anniversary of 9/11. So taking part in counterterrorism activities, that is supplies and supporting efforts to keep the world safe. This is something Canadians can be very proud of.
You're
and
right.
Those men and women aboard the Charlottetown and now the Regina and ships that guard our coastlines are playing such an important role for our country, for North America, but really for global peace and security.
You're right. The anniversary date adding a particular resonance to this today. The ship is returning. We think back 2 years ago when you sent 3 of the Navy ships to Newfoundland because of Igor and to help with the cleanup there. And I'm just wondering here, Leslie is barreling in, expected to make landfall later on this morning, not expected to be as severe as Igor, but is the Charlottetown ready to go if need be? Could the ship turn around quickly and be deployed there if need be?
Well, it would be a very tight turnaround, but I can tell you these men and women are always ready to roll out. There would have to be some preparations. We do have other ships that are available and ready to assist. This is, again, part of the domestic operations that are a constant constant challenge for the Navy, but for our Canadian forces generally. You spoke earlier in your broadcast about fires. We've responded to flooding, and by the way, there's flooding happening in Truro, Nova Scotia. So we're there to assist civil authorities. There's a protocol that kicks in when a request comes from a province or municipality. So we work very closely with other agencies, fire services, paramedics, police. This is the joined-up approach that the Canadian Forces have been involved in for years, and they're very professional, very dedicated, and always ready to go.
Right. Vicadopia reporting there has been a military advance team already on the ground there in case and planning for what happens with Leslie. So we'll keep an eye on that part of the story. Let me take you to something completely different, if you don't mind, since we're talking about this in the news this week. It was one of our top stories yesterday. This proposal that's really sort of taken on a little bit of momentum, put forward by retired Major General Louis McKenzie, number one of the backers anyway, to bring the Avro aircraft back, one of the great Canadian inventions of the 50s. Maybe it might be the replacement for the F-35. And I don't know if you were watching Power and Politics yesterday, but there was Louis McKenzie on with Evan talking about the whole idea and saying that your government has written off the idea too quickly. So let me ask you, since I have you here this morning, how much consideration you've given to the Avro and whether you might consider to continue to do so.
Well, as you just mentioned, Heather, this is 1950s technology that while there were experimental planes, it never came into use. I have tremendous respect for Major General Louis McKenzie. He has been one of our top soldiers and a very dedicated, patriotic Canadian. And he believes in this project. I have seen some of the plans and discussed it with him some time ago. He subsequently met with the Associate Defense Minister and officials. This is really a project now that is in a drawing board speculative state. The reality is we've been in a replacement program for the F-18 for some time, over a decade now. Resources sunk into that particular mission, and what we're really aiming towards now is waiting to hear back from the panel that we've put in place. The Public Works is oversee. We have a very comprehensive review of that replacement program, and we'll wait for advice from those officials.
At this point, is there any chance of the Arrow being the replacement fighter jet?
Look, that's not the direction that we're headed. We're waiting for recommendations from this panel. We're proceeding with a replacement program that will see a state-of-the-art aircraft representing the Royal Canadian Air Force by around 2020.
All right. Listen, I have to let you go. Lots of stories to discuss, but you know, I have to say congratulations before I do let you go. Your big Facebook announcement last Friday, your new wife, Nazanin, expecting your first child. How are you doing as father-to-be?
Well, that's very kind of you, Heather. Thank you. We're very excited, and Nazanin is feeling great about it. So
well, we're
I
showing a
appreciate
beautiful
all
wedding
of the support.
picture of the two of you here as we talk about this, but that must be very exciting for you as well.
Very kind of you. The greatest role ever is parenthood.
All right. Well, in your role as Defense Minister, I thank you for the time as always. Peter MacKay will be having some live coverage of that homecoming later on in Port. Thank you.
Joyous day in Halifax. Thank you, Heather.